April 1st, 2015. I logged into Reddit, awaiting the community's annual April Fool's joke. I quickly spotted an announcement post for R the Button, presumably the April Fool's joke of the year. Little did I know that it would turn into so much more than a simple joke. I followed the link to the blog post by the Reddit administrators, where the rules of the game were defined. They had created a button with a 60-second timer. Every time a user clicked the button, the timer would reset. You could only press the button once, and only pre-existing users could press it. Simple enough, I thought. I visited the subreddit, R the Button, to find the timer and the button prominently displayed at the top. 110,950 people had already pressed it. There I found posts by users excitedly telling others to not press the button, explaining what happens when you do press the button, and sharing their feelings after pressing the button. So what does happen when you press the button? According to this early user, nothing much. The timer resets and you cannot press again. Essentially, the button is pretty meaningless. I visited the button daily for a whole month, observing the changes in the subreddit and the development of the social experiment. Immediately, I was drawn to the button. But I wondered why. Why were I and so many others addicted to this button? Why did we keep coming back to the button? The days passed, and I found myself visiting the website even several times a day to monitor the status of the button. I wanted to know what the lowest time that had been reached was, and who got that time. And I wanted to know what the latest theories were on what will happen when the timer reaches 0. One aspect that made it so addicting for me and others was that the button was constantly ticking, constantly waiting for us. This aspect was reinforced by dozens of visualizations such as YouTube live streams, Twitter accounts, and even homemade button monitor websites. Users were constantly searching for new ways to analyze the button timer. Maybe interest in the button also stems from psychological reasons, I thought. Maybe some users are just bored. Maybe other people want a distraction from their normal life and want to invest their thought into the button, a thriving experiment and a thriving part of their life. And finally, it was clear that some members related the button to their addictive tendencies, using it as a symbol of overcoming the addiction, for some. I discovered that the button's addictive quality also flirted around the idea of terror management theory, the idea that humans invent meaning to push away our existential fear of death. The button became meaningful and addictive because it was a stand-in for our own deaths. People watched the clock and pressed the button as a way to keep something alive, to keep it ticking. Clearly, the button's innate qualities had made it addicting and caused people to return to the subreddit to communicate with each other in a community. But was there something more to this community? The community had developed into 100 different additional, related subreddits, and people made new posts very frequently. Why was the community so vibrant? Well, the front page of the subreddit didn't just have a timer. It also featured a color coding system to show when users pressed the button. A user got purple flare if they pressed the button at 50 to 60 seconds, all the way to red flare for 0 to 10 seconds. Immediately, this system served to divide users into groups. As a result of the flare, the community wasn't just divided into pressers versus non-pressers. Within pressers, users were further divided. People felt very strongly about which color flare they had. There was even discussion on the existence of a caste system related to the flare. Across the subreddit, users recognized that these colored flares had led to the establishment of a hierarchy. But it wasn't just that users had been divided by flare color. Members took it upon themselves to further divide into factions based on opinions, philosophies, theories, and even pseudo-religions. The Knights of the Button, for example, plan to swoop in when the button nears its end to attempt to prolong its life. This community was so highly developed that it formed alliances with other factions and even held elections. Users in our Presiah expected there to be a savior, a Presiah, that appeared when the timer reached 0. The Red Guard community was holding out for very low times and only wanted to receive red flare. R, the gray hopeful, consisted of members who hoped to stay gray forever, meaning they wanted never to press the button. R, orange revolution, included members who had pressed the button and received an orange flare. This faction promoted orange pride and reinforced identities as an orange presser. These many factions created an interesting dynamic. Tensions were created, alliances were formed, a hierarchy developed, but it wasn't clear who was at the top because of the many differing opinions. Were non-pressers at the top, or was it someone with a red 11-second flare? I felt myself persuaded by these factions. Users banded together in the forums, and I felt the overwhelming sense that I should not press the button. At least, just not yet. I didn't want to become a dirty presser. Apparently I and many other users had let the time we pressed the button become part of our identity. As the timer reached closer and closer to 0, I increasingly felt the force of these factions, which all had their eye on that timer too. What's so curious about the button is that even though it started as a simple game, it has become something extremely addicting for hundreds of thousands of people. The button has no meaning, yet an entire culture of over 800,000 people was developed around it. Its mysterious nature and the hierarchy that was established create a complex virtual community. The button exemplifies how social hierarchies and virtual communities can quickly develop on the internet, even when they are seemingly meaningless.